Hello everyone. Welcome to part 4 of the videos on admissions and confessions. We had started with from the series the this is the fourth part of the series in which we are covering the admissions and confession topic. In part 1 and 2 we had covered admission completely, and in part 3 of the video we had covered confession, the beginning part of confession, and we are moving forward with our next part on the confession topic. If you have not watched the previous videos, I would suggest you to first watch those videos before watching this video, so that you have an understanding. If you don't know confessions, if you have the fair understanding about confession, then you can start from this video as well. To give you a recap as to what we had discussed in our last lecture, we had discussed about confessions. We had discussed the definition of confession. We had also dealt with what are the judicial confessions which are given to court, and then the extrajudicial confessions also we had dealt with in depth. This was a major topic. This was a major beginning of this whole topic. So I think you were able to understand. Now, if you have any query, you can comment to me. Let's move forward. With we had also covered these cases as well, and the inculpatory and exculpatory part. If you want to deeply understand what are these statements, you can watch the last video. These we have already covered. Next, move forward with when confessions are irrelevant. This is an important topic in the confession part, because firstly we need to understand that if any confession is made, how will you determine whether this is confession is admissible in the court of law or not? For this, what you need to understand is section 22 of BSA, which says inducement, threat, or promise from person authority causing apprehension of temporal benefit, burden on accused, preponderance of probability. For this, what you need to understand is, if any confession, there can be circumstances in which a confession, because in the confession a person is basically giving a self-incriminating statement, as we had discussed in last class as well. Self-incriminating statement being a confession means that this person is saying that I am guilty of that, and there can be high chances that this whole confession as a statement is caused by inducement, threat, coercion, or promise. Why this will happen? There is a high probability that there is some person in authority. Person in authority hereby means, person in authority is not defined as such, but you can understand who the person in authority can be. There is an accused. He know that he will be convicted. What something can happen, but there is a person in authority who comes to him, that he induces this accused person and tells him. If you see in this case, you can understand, if this person, he's a person in authority, he tells to accused that if you will accept your guilt, then we will try to get the plea bargaining in the sense, or we will try to reduce your sentences you reduce sentence. These can be circumstances in which a person in authority can dominate accused. And the whole purpose of criminal law, criminal jurisprudence, is to protect the rights of accused. So, under section 22, if there is any indication, if there is any proof which shows that this whole statement is because of inducement or certain threat, accused is facing some sort of threat from a person in authority, there can be such situation. Or there is certain promise which is made by prosecution, probably another prosecution has made a promise to accused that if you will accept your guilt, we will try to reduce your sentence. You will be this There can be circumstances of such nature in which there can be this accused, even though is not liable, but because of another parties, hereby we also take into consideration, if you're writing this answer, you need to tell what is the objective behind giving such a protection. These are to safeguard the rights of accused, because in multiple cases what we have seen is that because sometimes accused is illiterate, don't know their legal rights, because of certain promises, threats of such a nature, the accused who do not know, who are not aware about their legal rights, they are implicated, they are convicted. Such scenarios is this is a job of the court to ensure that such scenarios don't happen. This is a major reason why we have this. The whole the justice system is designed to protect the accused as well, because until and unless this person, the proper evidence is there, this accused will always be presumed to be innocent. You also need to understand this part whereby I've explained you about inducement, threat, and promise. Firstly, what you need to understand is that whenever, because this statement, like any inducement, threat, or promise, or coercion, it should be able, this must be causing, this must be the reason why accused has given his or her confessional statement, and accused must feel that he will his position accused will feel that his position will be better better, because he is getting certain gains, temporal gains, certain gains he is getting. Because of that he has made these inducement. If such scenarios is there, that this whole, because of this inducement that promises, whole accused has given his confessional statement, then that confessional statement will be considered irrelevant by the court, it will not be admissible. That's a major question. And then the major question is about the person in authority. As I told you, person in authority, it's a very wider, it's wider in scope, it's not properly defined. But what it must do is, this person should have the power to affect the charge or proceeding, or influence the course of proceeding against the accused. This person should have the power to change the proceedings. This person has the power. That is the definition of person in authority. Another important factor which you need to understand about inducement, threat, and promise is that in such scenarios, if such an if so, just assume that in this case, accused has given a confessional statement, and later on accused tells to the court that this whole confessional statement was made because of certain inducement, threat. Firstly, you need to understand that the burden will be on the accused. This will be burden on the accused to show that this all things has happened. And but the major thing which you need to understand is that, because when we're doing the burden of proof, then you will understand that the major task of accused side, the ones who are defending, that is to just create a reasonable doubt in mind of court. If in this particular case they are successful in creating a doubt in the mind of the court that this whole confectional statement has been given because of certain inducement, threat, or something, then this will be considered irrelevant by the court, and then it will be the job of the prosecution to prove it, because prosecution has to prove the whole case beyond the reasonable doubt. Beyond reasonable doubt. Let's move forward with our next part. Next part talks about the confession to police and police custody. These are also important factors. If you want to have a read before going into that, I'll read these notes to you. A confession is inadmissible if the court believes it has been caused by inducement, threat, or promise from person in authority. This person in authority is usually police, magistrate, government official, with reference to the charge against the accused, because they have the ability to control. They have the ability to control the control charges, or the criminal proceedings. Some government official or magistrate with reference to the charge against they are likely to make the accused believe that he would gain or avoid evil by confessing. That is the rationale is to unfair pressure and coercion. We have dealt with that. So law presumes that a confession so motivated, if this confession is given because of these all elements, then what the court presume that it is unreliable in nature. If accused raises circumstances suggesting coercion, the prosecution must show the confession was voluntary, though the initial burden is on the accused. Initial burden, if the confession after confession, initial burden to prove that his confession was made under these circumstances is on the accused, but the burden is just to create a reasonable doubt in the mind of court. It is not to prove beyond the doubt. Then prosecution will have to. It will be the job of the prosecution to prove that it was made voluntarily, as we will discuss in burden of proof, and we'll deal with in a more elaborate way as to why this happens, and how the burden of proof works in a criminal law. You must have dealt in your criminal law about that, but we'll deeply cover it in our later videos. That's applies where an inducement is express or implied and covers both judicial and extrajudicial settings. Both extrajudicial and judicial settings are covered under this ambit. Now let's move forward with the topic about inadmissibility of confession to police officer. The general rule is what? General rule states that any confession made to police officer can't be proved against the accused under any circumstances. What it means is that if any sort of confessional statement is made to accused, that will not become any ground, that will never be considered admissible, that will not be relevant while deciding the whole case. Why this whole provision is made? Because world over, what the law has observed over the year is that police has always been known for brutality. They have been known for pressurizing the accused, torturing the accused to tell to give these confessions. Because of that, we have this protection. Recognize the risk of police coercion and protect against forced confession. That is a major reason why we have it. Inadmissibility of confession in police custody, as well as to police and also in police custody. If any confessional statement is made in police custody, that will also be not admissible. The rule states that any confession made while in police custody is inadmissible unless it is made in the immediate presence of magistrate. The magistrate is considered to be a safeguard because he will be a judicial magistrate, so it is considered to be a neutral party. So if it is made before the magistrate, then it will be admissible. But if there is no presence of magistrate and it is made in police custody, it will be inadmissible in the court. Meaning of custody, you need to understand that what constitute a custody. Custody does not include any situation where the accused is under police control, not just in a lockup or cell. Can be in hospital, at the scene, or any police guarded place. It means that it is not required to be any sort of jail or lockup, which you usually think a custody is. Custody can be any police control. If a person is locked in a room, or it is under the supervision of police. What the law presumes is that because in all of these circumstances, there will be a fear in the mind of the accused because of the presence of police. It's presumed by the law. So that's why these all confessionary statement, if it's made in such scenarios under such circumstances, they will be inadmissible in the court. As we have already discussed, what is the objective behind having such a provision is ensure confessions are voluntary and made without police influences. We need to reduce the police influences because of the past crime which we have seen about police brutality. We have a lot of cases which discuss about all these scenarios. uh, you can read upon those cases. There have been a lot of cases in which police were involved in causing brutalities. Because of that, we under evidence law, we have codified this particular whole law. Now you need to understand who is a police officer. Firstly, you need to understand, we have discussed about police officers, but a lot of people are confused as to uh, police officer. What is a police officer we are talking about? Police officer here, why we are talking about the test to determine who a police officer is, he must have the powers to make investigation of the crime. Powers, what are the powers we are talking about? Power of arrest, search and seizure, to make, to register FIR. Also, you can write they have the power to file a police report under section 19. I'm so sorry writing this. 193 clause 3 of BNSS. You can write in your answer as to who the police officer are. That shows that you need to understand also who the police officer are while dealing with any case which is about this whole provision. You need to also understand who the police officers are. Let's move forward from here to the next part. We've discussed this part. Now you also need to understand that mere presence of the police officer is not one thing, the major important factor which you need to understand here as well, that mere presence of police does not make confessions inadmissible. Just to understand the scenario is like if A and B, these are two friends. A has made the confession to his friend B, and B has been summoned by the court as witness, and B had to testify under oath, and B was asked this question as to what the A told. Then B answered this question and told that A had confessed that A had done the murder of C. This was the whole scenario in this case. But here A pleads that when he made this confession, the police officer was in the whole premises where these two people are sitting. A police officer was also sitting. Here, police officer as a person was sitting. Should it be considered to be a ground of making the admission confession which was made to friend to be inadmissible? No. Why? Because here there was mere presence of police. He was present there, but was A under the fear? What was under a fear? Was he feeling as to be under the control of police officer? No. So this question answer is no. Why we have a provision about police officer is because the law presumes that there can be circumstances of brutality or torture or something, or may probably the accused or probably police officer themselves are not corrupt. There can be circumstances as that, and it is the duty of the law to protect. And so that's why it should be made before magistrate, which is considered. But such kind of extrajudicial confessions are also admissible, and they cannot be denied just merely because of the presence of police officer. That is a easy scenario. That was one of the major part which were discussed in a lot of cases. So it is important for you to understand that. Another important part about the discovery statement. This is an exception to confessions which are made to police officer. What happens in discovery statement basically mean if a person in police custody provides information that leads to discovery of a new fact, the location of a weapon. That specific part of statement is admissible, but only the portion directly leading to the discovery. What this means is that if accused was in police custody, probably was in police custody, and he has given his confession, because we know that any confession which is made to a police officer is not valid. But here, what the accused said, just analyze what the situation is. Here, the accused tells that I stabbed him and put the knife under the bridge. Accused tells, put the knife. Only the part I put the knife under the bridge. Here, I put the knife under the bridge. What it is not it's not incriminating him. It is not incriminating in nature. It is giving a new fact. Because one thing which you need to understand is only confessional statements given to police are inadmissible. Any non-confessional statement means any other statement which is not making him guilty directly, but it can be used as circumstantial evidence. Hereby, if you see, he said that I put the knife. All right. He said that he put the knife under the bridge is admissible if knife is recovered from there. If the police finds that the knife is recovered from the place, from the bridge, then it will be admissible because it is giving a new discovery. The requirement why we need to add this provision is that firstly it's not incriminating, it is not violative of article 20 of the constitution. The accused has not been compelled, he has himself given any new evidence which was further further helped in recovering that particular weapon. So it needs, what the purpose here is, the purpose balances need for investigative leads with protection against coerced confessions. The first part about I stabbed him, it will not be admissible. Only the second part will be made admissible in court of law. Further, as we have discussed about discovery statement, as we have discussed in a proper way as to discovery statement, what is the relevance. Firstly, what are the constituent ingredients which would be fulfilled? Firstly, about the person accused of offense. Discovery statement will only be considered to be a discovery statement when it is given by person who is accused in this particular case. This whole statement, what it says is, when the discovery is sought against is, this discovery had happened at that particular point of time, this person should be accused, he should be put on trial, he should be on trial, he must be charges should be there. Only then this would be considered to be discovery statement by him. He should be in police custody. Fact discovered from information. This fact, the new fact about discovery, has recovered from the information which has been given by him. And then the requirement, we know this portion relates to the fact discovered and object from place of hiding. One thing which is important to understand from place of hiding is, this place of hiding is an essential component. There are 2-3 cases which has dealt about it in detail. Firstly, it's that this object which we are talking about should be discovered from the place of hiding. What it means is that this object should not be easily openly available, because otherwise it can raise the questions about that accused must have been told about this whole weapon by someone else. It should be some place which is a place of hiding. It should not be openly available to everyone. Because if a one thing which you need to understand, if it is lying openly, there are high chances that others also know about it. And it was not discovered in consequence of information received from the accused. One thing which is important about this object is, discovery of object should happen. Discovery of object should happen in consequence of the information received from accused. Accused should have given a statement. From there they get to know that the information, that get to know about the place of hiding where that particular weapon or anything is, and then this discovery happened. It happened in consequence of the information. This whole object where the whole weapon or object which is discovered, anything which is discovered, it should not be openly available. That is a major thing which you understood, what is the rationale why we have this. Important case law which you need to understand from here is Muhammad Inayatullah versus State of Maharashtra. You can refer to this case This case also gives this is a landmark case in which SC Supreme Court has held that it is essential to prove that the object was discovered from the place of hiding. It is essential for it to be called a discovery. It should be discovered from a place of hiding. This place of hiding. If the object is lying in an open place, there are chances that others know about it, and it will be difficult to prove that object was discovered at instance of information provided by the accused. If this is openly lying, if it is lying in like a park, how will you prove? Because they have stated that accused has said it, but it will be difficult to prove that in this scenario. Why it will be difficult to prove this? Because it is accessible to everyone. And how will you prove that from the information the accused has given, this whole weapon or something which is discovered has been found? The major requirement which you need to understand is it should be recovered in consequence of the information received. Means accused has told this that this is at this place, like under the bridge, or at a particular place where every no one else has the access, only accused has the access, and because of that it will prove the truthfulness of this whole confession as to discovered discovery statement. The confessionary statement would not be valid if it is made before the police, but the discovery statement, and as a result of this statement, if that whole weapon or any other discovered object is found, then it will be admissible. I hope I was able to make this clear to every one of you. Please read on to it. It's not that easy concept to even discuss with you, because once you will read, you'll understand what I'm trying to tell to you. Read the bare acts properly to understand this fact in a more detailed manner. If you have any query, you can comment to me. Now let's move forward to the last topic of this whole confession, admissions and confessions. This whole last topic is about confession by co-accused, which is covered under section 24. What is section 24? This lays down the rules. What it means is, if this is accused, this is also accused. This accused comes before the court and confesses. They both are jointly tried. Jointly tried. Why they are jointly tried? They have done some offense together. They are offense together. Two or more jointly tried jointly. What it means, if this person has given a confession, he is implicating him also. He said that we did it. He said we did this crime. Because he said this, should he also be held liable for this? That is a major question which has been before the court. Firstly, the essential ingredients which require to be fulfilled here in this case is two or more persons tried jointly for same offense or its abetment or attempt. That is, for the same offense they should be charged either for abetment or attempt. Confession made by one co-accused. Here in this case, both are the accused. One co-accused has given out a statement. Confession implicates maker and others. Here in this example, you need to understand is, here he said we did it. This means he is implicating for confession by co-accused. One of the major requirement is he is basically making himself as well as another party liable. If just imagine if the situation has been, this person tells that this person comes and tells that this is A and this is B. A is and B are jointly tied, but A tells that B caused this crime, and I did not do it, and I did not do it. Would it be considered to be under this? Because here he's making another person liable, because another person is implicating B, but he is absolving himself. He's saying that I did not do it. Firstly, it's not a confession, so it will not be under section 24. That will easily be eliminated. You understand, the essentials are not getting fulfilled in this case. Now, important thing is confession duly proved against maker. Here in this case, what happens is confession is made duly proved. It's proved that A has caused this. But should B be also held liable for this? Firstly, you need to understand what is the evidentiary value of such statements. We will deal with it. Because such statements statement which is given, this can make the statement of A can make, because if confession is properly duly proved against A, it is proved that A has caused it and he has given a confession as well. This will be because we have talked about that confession as a substantive piece of evidence. For A to be held liable, he has confessed. But should B be also implicated? One thing which you need to understand about this fact is that they are merely corroborative. For B, A's statement will can only be a corroborative evidence. There will be further evidences required to be provided by prosecution. B cannot solely be held liable based upon the confession of A. We'll also talk about why we have this whole safeguard. Firstly, let's understand if a confession is made after influence, that we have covered. Yes. Let's move forward with confession after implicating co-accused. When two or more accused are tried jointly, here in this case, these two people are jointly tried together. And then what happens is one makes a confession implicating himself and and others. He has made here we have A and B. He has given a statement which is implicating him, both of them, A and B. A has given a statement that we did it. We did this crime. The court may consider such confession against all so implicated. Here, A's confession will be considered against B as well, but the evidentiary value will be different. Only applies if all are tried together. We have covered this. Confession is weak. Corroborative evidence cannot form the sole basis for conviction of a co-accused, but may add strength to existing facts. As I told you about evidentiary value, let's discuss what the evidentiary value is. For A and B, as I told you, A has said that he has made a due confession. He has made confession. For him, for this confession will be a substantive piece of evidence to for the conviction of A, for A's conviction. But this testimony, because as I told you, they are co-accused. In this case, this whole A's confession sub will be corroborative evidence against B. Only on the basis of A's confession, B cannot be held liable. The prosecution will have the burden of proof to bring more evidences, more circumstantial evidences, more substantive evidences. More circumstantial evidences would require to be brought by the prosecution. B cannot be held liable because of sole confession of A, even though it will have a corroborative value. That will be the evidentiary value. We call it weak evidence, but still it has some value. Why we have now you understand why we have these provision, because there are huge chances that this whole confession of A, probably A wants to make B also liable for and this B also liable, and also should A's statement should make be liable. No, such situation should not happen. Here in this particular case, A has given a confession. There are high chances that A probably can be lying, or A wants B also to be implicated in this whole case. There can be a lot of scenarios based upon that. So because of that, B will not be held. B for this confession of A will only be a corroborative evidence. Further evidence and circumstantialism would be required. Evidentiary value and judicial question. Central to admissibility, the court must be satisfied that the confession was made freely and not under duress, inducement, promise. That is, we have covered already. This confession is required to prove these all essential requirements. Judge must ascertain whether the confession is true and reliable, considering circumstances and consistency with other evidences. The requirement of ensuring it's reliable and true. If an accused retracts a confession, later denies or explain it away, court require strong corroboration before treating it as a basis for conviction. These are the major topics which we have already covered. Just a revision in the sense that if accused tries retracts a confession, as we discussed, if takes back his confession, later denies or explain it away. Court requires strong corroboration before treating as a basis for conviction. Here, because accused has created reasonable doubt in the mind of the court. All right, then the prosecution will again need to bring in the evidence to show that it was voluntarily made. While a judicial confession to a magistrate may sometimes be sufficient on its own, an extrajudicial confession or retracted confession must be corroborated by other credible evidences before it can serve as the main ground for conviction. You need to understand, if any confession is made before a magistrate, if it is made before a magistrate, then there's high chances about the truthfulness or reliability. But if it is made outside of, like, to made before a friend, made before a priest, made before anyone else, under such circumstances you need to understand that there can be chances that it is not a proper confession, or the another person is lying. Then it must require to be corroborated. There is requirement of other credible evidences as well, which should be supplemented with this particular confession to make it highly reliable. Court will It must be corroborated with other credible evidences before it can serve as a main ground for conviction. That are the important parts we have discussed. Just for the revision, let's do case laws and what are the principles. Courts prefer not to rely solely on a confession. As I told you, confessions code don't usually allow, but when it is judicial confessions, then there is a high bar of truthfulness, because why would anyone speak, why would anyone say lie before a judicial magistrate? That is a major question. Especially if retracted, unless supported with other strong evidences, it requires to be corroborated with other strong evidences. Then another part is about confession should be read as a whole, including exculpatory parts. Exculpatory parts we have covered in our last class, in which I had explained it in a proper way. Exculpatory part is the one which is absolving the accused from any liability. It should also be uh, read together while dealing with confession as a topic. What are the safeguards? Ensure that innocent person are not convicted based on unreliable or forced confessions, and that prosecution does not misuse this powerful form of evidence. This is a powerful form of evidence. Is all the important essential controls which judiciary need to ensure it is there before any accused is made liable for the confession. As we have also discussed about admission and a confession as a topic, let's also deal with we have discussed that admissions, we have discussed in a proper way to understand that admissions are comprehensive, includes confessions. Admissions in a sense includes confessions as well. Confessions are also a form of admissions only, but the specific safeguards, because confessions can only be made by, if you understand, the admissions are statements, oral, written or electronic, by a party suggesting any inferences to fact and issue. These are basically any which is providing any inferences as to fact and issue. But confessions, if you consider, they are specifically for the accused who is admitting his guilt. There is no specific definition which is given under evidence law at BNS which suggests about the confessions, but are judicially defined, which we have covered in the earlier cases as well. Go to the last video to understand the definition of confession if you want to comprehensively deal with definition of confessions. Then we have discussed that admissions can be applicable both to a civil and a criminal proceedings, but confession, if you see, are only applicable on the criminal proceedings. We have also dealt with that admissions can be made by the party themselves or the representatives, like agent, authorized agent, representative. But in cases of confessions, what we discuss, it is made by the accused himself for an offense. We dealt with admissions can be self-harming also and self-serving also. But confessions may always self-incriminatory, because confession itself means that you are admitting your guilt and must relate to the commission of the crime. Confessions are purely criminal based. You can be able to understand what is the difference here. Also, Admissions are substantive evidence. They are substantive evidence in itself. Based upon that, but they may be rebutted or explained. When it comes to confessions, can be a strong basis for conviction if voluntary and reliable. Confessions are a very important reliable basis. If it is properly, it's judiciary scrutinizes if the confession is duly properly made, all the essentials of a valid or relevant confession is getting fulfilled. There is no inducement, threat, and everything. And also confessions can become the sole ground on which the conviction can happen. But for the admissions part, it is a substantive evidence, but it's not conclusive in itself. Also, considering what admissions are generally admissible against the maker, subject to some exceptions. There are certain exceptions which we dealt about without prejudice in civil cases, which we dealt in second video of this whole lecture series. You should go back and read about what are the without prejudice, which I covered very deeply, and then about admission confessions as a topic admissible only if made voluntarily, not to police, not in police custody unless before a magistrate. We dealt with this section as well, in which we talked about that this admissions confession to be proper, to be relevant, it should not be made before a police confessions are inadmissible in court. The Indian Evidence Act sections, the old sections, you need to understand, you need to know what are the old sections are, now the new sections are. Then there is no requirement of corroboration but may strengthen the weight of evidence. For the admissions there is no requirement. And then it comes to confessions. Judicial confessions may not require corroboration. Extrajudicial confessions usually require corroboration. We have dealt with about this in this video itself, that judicial confessions are considered to be has a high probability of truthfulness, because why would an accused make a statement which is not true before a judicial magistrate. Judicial magistrate is also considered to be a neutral party. But when it comes to extrajudicial confession, like made to a friend, priest, such confessions are considered to be not highly reliable. So there is requirement of corroboration. Further evidences are required. So admissions can be withdrawn or explained if any admission is made. We have also dealt about the electronic admissions from the through the electronic records as well. There can be circumstances in which this whole admission was made because of certain mistake, or because someone has tried to lie, or there was some anonymity. There can be certain situations, they can be explained. Further evidence can be given by the party to explain that this whole admission is wrong. Court has a duty to decide its evidentiary value. For the confession part, once a confession is made, if you're retracting your confession, it is bar on you. The accused has a duty to explain why he has made the statement earlier. That will be on the accused. He will have to create a reasonable doubt in the mind of court. Then is admission generally used only against the maker. Who has made the admission, it will be used only against him. For the confession, we have dealt with about the part that confession by one accused can be used against the other accused, but only as corroborative evidence. But still, if they both are under the joint trial, then it can be used. To give an example of admission, like very simple example is, I was present where the accident happened. He himself has admitted before the court that he was present at the where the accident happened. This is self-harming, because it will further raise questions about why he was present, what you were doing, what you saw. For the confessions part, I stabbed the deceased during the altercation. It is making him directly guilty here. He said that I stabbed the deceased, which makes him liable, which make him guilty, not liable. I would call it guilty, because here is a criminal proceedings are going on, make him guilty, and he can be charged for this as well, and then further conviction can happen on the basis of confessionary statement. This by this we end this video as well. We have completed part 4 of the video on confessions and admissions as well. Thank you so much for patience listening. I've tried to explain it the best way as I could. If something is missing, you want more insights into, not able to understand certain aspects, I can create more videos on this. Please let me know about this in comment section. Please do subscribe the channel, like this video. In case you have any query, you can mention to you can come back to me, share your knowledge as well. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.